At my wedding, my dad said, "You don't deserve him." The groom's reaction shocked everyone. On the day I was supposed to marry the love of my life, my father stood up and said, "You don't deserve him." Everyone gasped, but what my groom did next made the entire room stand still. Cut to title card, based on a true story of love, betrayal, and truth. They called it the perfect wedding. The lights, the flowers, the music. Every detail measured, rehearsed, polished to please one man. My father. From the outside, everything looked flawless. Inside, I was holding my breath. My name is Emily. I've spent 28 years trying to be the daughter my father wanted and the woman he would never respect. My fiancé, Daniel, was everything he claimed to value. Successful, educated, kind. But kindness, to my father, was weakness. And weakness was the one thing he couldn't tolerate. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I tried not to notice the way my father's compliments always came with a blade. "You look lovely, Emily. Just try not to talk too much today." Or the constant comparisons to my sister, Claire, his favorite trophy. Claire never made scenes. Claire knew how to behave. I told myself that if I stayed quiet, if I smiled the right way, if I just survived one more day of his control, maybe he'd finally see me as enough. The night before the wedding, I went downstairs to grab some water. I stopped when I heard voices drifting from the study. My father's. "She'll ruin his life," he was saying. "She's weak, just like her mother. Daniel will regret this marriage before the year's out." My throat closed. My mother, the woman he'd driven away years ago, had been the same target of that tone, that cruelty wrapped in authority. I stood in the hallway, barefoot in my silk robe, listening to the sound of my own father tearing me apart like I wasn't his child, but a disappointment he'd been forced to raise. For a moment, I wanted to walk in, to shout, to tell him he was wrong. But then I remembered, every argument with him ended the same way. His voice louder, mine smaller. So I turned away. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the one before. In the mirror, my reflection looked calm, shoulders straight, smile rehearsed. But beneath the makeup, the girl staring back already knew. Tomorrow, I'd be wearing armor, not a wedding dress. I whispered to myself, "Just one day, Emily. You can survive one more day." I had no idea that the man who claimed to protect me was about to destroy my peace in front of everyone I loved, and that my groom's reaction would change everything. I wasn't born afraid of my father. He taught me to be. When I was little, every mistake came with a lecture, every tear with a warning. "Stop crying, Emily. Strong people don't cry." He measured love in achievements, grades, trophies, obedience. If you failed, you learned quickly that silence hurt less than disappointment. My mother tried to protect me once. She called him out in front of friends during a dinner party. The next morning, her closet was empty, her car gone. Dad never spoke her name again. I was 12. From that day, I became the daughter who apologized for existing. Years later, at university, I met Daniel. He was nothing like my father, steady, kind, thoughtful. He listened when I spoke. I still remember the first time he saw me flinch at a raised voice in a restaurant. He lowered his tone immediately and said, "I'm not him." It took months before I believed him. When he proposed, it wasn't grand or loud. It was quiet, private, perfect. He said, "You don't have to be small with me, Emily." But when I told my father, his expression hardened. "An architect? That's not stability. He'll never provide the life you deserve." I didn't argue. I knew better. Arguing only turned affection into ammunition. Still, Daniel tried. He visited my parents' house once, bearing a bottle of wine and the kind of respect my father demanded from everyone else. "Sir, I'd like your blessing," Daniel said. My father smiled without warmth. "Blessing? Earn it." That was the last time they spoke face to face. Over the next year, planning the wedding became an emotional obstacle course. Every decision a test. "No, that color's tacky. That menu's cheap. Your sister's venue was classier." Each insult disguised as advice. I stopped inviting him to fittings just to breathe, Daniel would find me sitting alone on the floor surrounded by fabric swatches and invoices. He'd kneel beside me, his hand brushing mine. "We'll get through this, Em. One day he won't decide for you anymore." I wanted to believe that. But when you grow up inside someone else's control, freedom feels unnatural, like stepping out into sunlight after years underground. As the wedding approached, I tried to convince myself that marriage would be my way out. That once I said, "I do," my father's hold would finally end. I didn't realize yet that people like him don't let go quietly. And when he couldn't control the wedding, he decided to control the moment that should have belonged to me. Dawn broke soft and gold across the city, the kind of morning that should have felt like a dream. Instead, it felt like holding my breath underwater. My wedding dress hung by the window, a whisper of white against the light. Everyone said the day would belong to me, but nothing about it did. The planner was on the phone, my bridesmaids whispering in corners, and my father's voice already filling the hall. "Where's the photographer? Who approved these flowers?" I said ivory, not cream. Every word carried that sharp edge I'd known since childhood. The morning was supposed to be calm, makeup, laughter, champagne, but his presence turned everything brittle. I kept smiling for the mirror, letting the makeup artist paint serenity over fear. Inside, my stomach twisted. Then came the first hit of sabotage. The car that was supposed to pick up my mother late. The music playlist changed. My own entrance song replaced with the same one my sister used at her wedding.
Subtle. Petty. Perfectly him.
When I confronted the coordinator, she looked confused. "Your father said you wanted tradition," she explained. I said nothing, just nodded. Tradition, his favorite weapon. 10 minutes later, he swept into the bridal suite like a storm in a tailored suit. "Don't forget to smile," he said, straightening my veil as if arranging a prop. "Dad, please. No tears today, Emily. Don't embarrass me." He left the door open behind him, his voice trailing down the corridor. At least Claire never made a scene. My bridesmaid, Anna, closed the door gently. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" she asked, eyes full of pity and anger. I stared at my reflection. The bride looked perfect, hair pinned, pearls glowing, smile steady. But I saw the truth beneath it, a woman stitched together from apologies. "Because he's my father," I whispered. "Just for one more day." Anna shook her head. "He's going to ruin this for you." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but not us." Outside, the bells began to ring. Guests arriving, cameras flashing, the hum of expectation building like pressure in my chest. As we stepped into the limousine, I caught my mother's reflection in the window seat beside me. Older.
Softer.
Eyes full of both pride and warning. She hadn't spoken to my father in years, yet she'd come anyway. "Are you sure about this, Emily?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I'm sure about Daniel." She squeezed my hand. "Then remember that when he tries to take today from you." The car turned onto the church road. My heart thudded harder with every passing second. The music, the guests, the vows, everything waited just ahead. I had no idea that before I could say "I do," my father would stand up in front of everyone and try to break me one last time. The church doors opened to a flood of light, and for a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. Rows of faces turned toward me. Cameras flashed. The organ swelled. It was the moment every little girl dreams about, except I wasn't that little girl anymore. I saw Daniel waiting at the altar, hands clasped, eyes steady. One look from him anchored me. Every tremor, every memory of my father's voice quieted. I told myself, just make it down the aisle. After today, you'll finally be free. Step by step, veil trailing, my mother's perfume beside me, the world softened into color and sound. For the first time that morning, I felt peace, fragile, new, but real. And then, just as the minister opened his book, the peace shattered. My father rose from the front pew. The scrape of his chair echoed like thunder in the vaulted hall.
"Stop," he said, loud.
Commanding. Every whisper died. "This wedding shouldn't happen," he continued. "Daniel, you don't know what you're marrying. She's weak, just like her mother."
Gasps.
Someone dropped a bouquet. My throat closed around air that refused to move. I remember the smell of lilies, the sting of tears pressing against my lashes. All my life, he'd humiliated me in private. Now he wanted an audience. My mother reached for his arm, whispering, "Richard, please." He shook her off. "She'll ruin him." I looked at Daniel, terrified he'd believe it. But he didn't move. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on my father with a calm that scared me more than shouting ever could. The minister froze, unsure what to do. Guests shifted in their seats. Phones rose halfway, recording, then lowered again. "Say something," my father demanded. "Tell them the truth, Daniel." And Daniel finally spoke. His voice was low, even. "You're right, sir. I don't know everything about her." The crowd held its breath. He took my hand. "But I do know this. No woman deserves to be spoken to the way you just spoke to her." My father's face hardened. "You'll regret this." Daniel shook his head. "No, I'll remember it. Because one day, when we have a daughter, I'll make sure she never has to hear a man call her weak." The words landed like lightning. For a long moment, no one moved. Then applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger, rising through the vaulted ceiling. My father's expression flickered between anger and disbelief. He turned, grabbed his coat, and walked out, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the music restarting behind him. I stood trembling, veil fluttering against my shoulders, as Daniel turned back to me. "You still want to do this?" he whispered. I nodded, voice shaking. "More than ever." The minister cleared his throat, pages rustling, the ceremony finding its rhythm again. When Daniel said, "I do," his voice carried across the silence like a promise stronger than blood. When I said it back, it felt like a door closing on 28 years of fear. As we walked down the aisle together, people smiled through tears, and I caught sight of my mother standing near the doorway. She was crying, but this time, they were tears of pride, not pain. Outside, sunlight spilled across the church steps. I breathed it in like oxygen after drowning. The world would talk about the scene for weeks. The father who tried to stop a wedding, the groom who defended his bride. But for me, it wasn't gossip. It was the moment I finally understood what love was supposed to sound like, and what it never should again. The applause still echoed in my head long after the music stopped. But once the doors closed and the crowd began to fade, the silence returned. The kind of silence that follows after a storm. Heavy, sacred, fragile. Daniel and I stood behind the church, away from the cameras and whispers. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't hold the bouquet anymore. He brushed the tears from my cheek and said softly, "You never have to apologize for surviving him." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. The air finally reached my lungs, raw and unfamiliar, like breathing after years underwater. My mother approached slowly, her heels quiet on the stone. The woman who had once left with nothing was now standing taller than ever. She looked at Daniel first, her eyes full of gratitude. Then she turned to me. "You broke the cycle," she whispered. "I couldn't, but you did." Her voice trembled, and I saw tears in her eyes, not from pain this time, but from something lighter. We hugged, and for the first time in decades, I felt like someone's daughter again. Hours later, the reception glowed with laughter and music. But I moved through it all like a ghost, smiling, dancing, thanking guests, while inside, my mind replayed my father's words. "You don't deserve him." Maybe that's what he believed. But Daniel proved something different in front of everyone. I didn't have to deserve love. I just had to be someone capable of giving it back. Late that night, as we sat together in the quiet of our hotel room, my phone buzzed. A video was already trending online. A guest had recorded everything, my father's outburst, Daniel's defense, the applause. The headline read, "Groom defends bride after father publicly shames her at wedding." I pressed play. Watching the moment from a distance was surreal, like witnessing a stranger's life. But the comments, they poured in like a tide of empathy and fire. "This man is a hero." That father's words broke me. Every daughter deserves a moment like this. Within hours, it had 1 million views. People shared their own stories, of fathers who never apologized, of weddings where silence swallowed courage. My inbox filled with messages from women I'd never met, thanking me for existing, for standing there, for surviving. And for the first time in my life, I realized that maybe my pain had a purpose. It wasn't just a story of humiliation anymore. It was proof that love, real love, can rewrite the ending to a lifetime of control. Daniel kissed my hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I smiled through the tears. "I think I finally am." Outside, city lights blinked against the dark, like tiny promises of everything still ahead. My father had left the church in anger. But I left that day reborn. The weeks after the wedding felt like waking up from a nightmare I'd been trapped in my entire life. Daniel and I moved into our small apartment. Warm, bright, quiet. There was laughter in the kitchen, sunlight on the walls, and for once, no one measuring my worth by silence. But peace doesn't come without echoes. My father's shadow still lingered, in voicemails I didn't play, in news I didn't want to hear. Then one morning, while Daniel brewed coffee, a headline flashed across the TV. "Richard Weller and Sons under federal investigation. Financial misconduct alleged." My father's company, his empire of pride, the kingdom he built on control, was finally cracking. I stood there, frozen, watching a reporter describe irregular accounting, tax discrepancies, employee complaints. Words he once used to judge others now branded his name. My mother called later that afternoon. Her voice was gentle. "It's true," she said. "He's losing everything." I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat quietly, feeling the strange calm of justice, doing what I never could. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled for him. The contracts, the clients, the reputation. People he once looked down on refused to return his calls. And then one evening my phone buzzed.
Dad.
The screen glowed like a wound. I let it ring. Minutes later, a voicemail appeared. His voice sounded smaller, slower, unfamiliar. "Emily, I just wanted what's best. Maybe I was too hard. Maybe I was wrong. I don't know who else to call." I listened once. Then I deleted it. Daniel glanced at me, quietly setting down his mug. "You okay?" I nodded. For the first time, yes. A few days later, we visited my mother. Her little garden was blooming again. Wild roses, tulips, the kind of chaos my father always called messy. "It's beautiful," I told her. She smiled. "It finally gets sunlight now." The words hit deeper than she meant them to, because so did I. That night, Daniel and I planted a rose bush outside our home, a symbol of something reborn from ruin. As the soil touched my hands, I whispered, "This is for every version of me that thought I needed his approval." Daniel wrapped his arms around me, and for the one who doesn't anymore. The wind carried the scent of roses across the yard, sweet and clean. Somewhere, my father was learning what control costs when love is the price. I didn't need revenge. I already had peace, months past. The story of that wedding, the outburst, the video, the father who couldn't let go, became old news to everyone. Everyone but me. I still carried it, not like a wound anymore, but like a scar that no longer hurt to touch. Life moved forward quietly. The shop I opened with Daniel grew faster than we expected. Our days were full of small things. Coffee in mismatched mugs, late-night design plans, laughter that echoed down hallways no one ever yelled through. Some nights, I'd sit by the window and think about my father. The man who once filled every room with noise now lived surrounded by silence of his own making. I didn't hate him. I didn't need to. Hate is just another form of attachment, and I was finally free. One afternoon, I received a letter in handwriting I'd almost forgotten. My father's. Just 3 lines. "I watched your wedding video again. You looked happy. I hope he treats you better than I ever did." I read it once, then folded it carefully and placed it inside a drawer, not to save it, but to end it. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need closure. That evening, Daniel found me standing in the garden by the rose bush we planted. The flowers had grown wild, uncontrolled, radiant. "You still think about him?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," I said. "But not with anger. Just understanding." He smiled. "That's how I know you healed." The wind moved through the petals, carrying their scent into the golden dusk. I looked at Daniel, the man who chose me not in spite of my past, but because I had survived it. "He told me I didn't deserve you," I whispered. Daniel smiled faintly.
He was right. You didn't deserve me.
"You deserve better." I laughed, really laughed, and in that sound, years of pain dissolved into air. I leaned against a shoulder, watching the sunset spill warmth across our home. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel unseen. I just felt free. The camera could have faded there, on that quiet picture of peace. A woman who finally stopped fighting for her father's approval and started living for her own joy. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving to yourself that you never needed their permission to be right.